This is All Things Ansys, a podcast from the technical support staff at PADT. Episode 90. We dig into a fantastic application of Ansys LS-DYNA for modeling lungs, along with news and events from the world of Ansys. Welcome to our little podcast. I'm Eric Miller, one of the owners of PADT and your host. Here at our Tempe offices, we are getting closer to what I think used to be normal. I've noticed more people moving back into their office, and I've spent time sitting in the actual traffic, driving to and from real face-to-face meetings with people. It is nice, and a big shout out to the scientists, quality engineers, lab technicians, manufacturing engineers, supply chain managers, and probably a dozen other professions who have made this vaccine available to us. I hope that things are improving for those of you in other parts of the world. We are watching things closely and know the worst is not over. Our hearts go out to everyone that has or is still suffering because of this pandemic. So this is episode 90. That's kind of a nice round number. It's not 100, but it's kind of amazing when you think that we've done 90 of these. It's hard to believe. We've got 3 or 4 months before we get to 100, and we'll try and do something special for that day. So I want to thank everybody for listening to the podcast and sharing it with your friends, subscribing where you can subscribe to whatever podcast tool you use, and please send suggestions as well for things for us to cover and what you'd like to hear or not hear. For our interview today, we have a user, Jacob Riglin from Los Alamos National Labs. If you're not familiar with the U.S. Department of Energy labs, they're government R&D facilities located around the country that were first established. Well, let me just read to you the text on the website. An outgrowth of the immense investment in scientific research initiated by the U.S. government during World War II, the national laboratories have served as the leading institutions for scientific innovation in the United States for more than 70 years. The Energy Department's 17 national labs tackle the critical scientific challenges of our time, from combating climate change to discovering the origins of our universe, and possess unique instruments and facilities, many of which are found nowhere else in the world. They address large-scale, complex research and development challenges with a multidisciplinary approach that places an emphasis on translating basic science to innovation. I want to share that for some context, and our guest will explain a little bit more. When COVID happened, the labs pivoted and worked hard to help solve a huge set of problems, including looking at respiration, which is what we're going to talk about today. It shows the power of LS-DYNA in the hands of what may be the greatest. I think Los Alamos is the greatest R&D facility in the world. Let's learn more. All right, I want to thank everybody for joining us today with Jacob Riglin from Los Alamos National Labs to talk today about some cool things they've been doing with simulation. Jacob, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So my first real question, what I really would like to share with the users is a little bit about yourself. You know, what your journey is to becoming a user of simulation tools, and then also, what your current role is.
Sure. So I'm a R&D engineer for the thermal and mechanical group here at the laboratory. And I got my start in simulation back predominantly in grad school. I used some Ansys tools to do some research and design on hydro turbines, actually,
Cool.
in the design process for the Navy.
Mm-hmm. Very, very cool. And so you're a CFD person, a stress person. What's your primary background?
Predominantly CFD, but I do have some experience on the mechanical side and more specifically with explicit analyses.
Good. Fun stuff. Always fun stuff. Well, we ran across the project you worked on because you were able to present a little bit about it to us. And I was just wondering if you could kind of explain to our listeners this particular project, what it was about, and what your goals were, and maybe delve a little bit into how you used simulation on the project.
Sure. So at the beginning of the pandemic, Congress passed the CARES Act, and part of that funding was dedicated towards research. And at the time, early in the pandemic, one of the big concerns was was mechanical ventilation. Not only do we have enough ventilators, but also, how are those ventilators being operated? How are those being used, and how can we increase the positive outcomes during the operation of those ventilators? And so that's really kind of how the project took off. And initially, it was more of a manufacturing project with the goal of improving the supply chain of these novel ventilators, and then it slowly kind of transformed into more of a research-oriented project where we were looking at the flow within the human lung. We were looking at experimenting with mucus, looking at aerosol delivery in the lung. So really, the scope and the breadth of what we actually looked at was very, very broad.
That's cool. So I know that early on, people were looking at some pretty crude kind of like CPR type devices and automating those. Were you looking at more traditional ventilators, or some of these ones that basically used a bag and squished the bag?
We were looking at some newer generations of ventilators. Some of the traditional ventilators. There's various approaches, but one of the more recent types of ventilation that's used is high oscillatory ventilation. So imposing oscillations on that incoming flow that's being driven into the lung. And so we focused most of our efforts on that and seeing if it would improve mucus removal and aerosol delivery in what you could define as the worst of the worst COVID patients.
Yeah. So were you modeling the ventilators? Were you modeling the lungs, or both? Or
so in terms of modeling, it's interesting because we had an experimental setup where we had basically a mock setup of involving artificial lungs. So in some ways, we're even the experimentation side, you could call that modeling in some way, but the actual numerical modeling that we did, we used Space Claim to clean up a lung geometry, an STL file that was really messy, and basically produce a geometry that we could conduct CFD simulations on. And then we also had there are other aspects of the modeling that went beyond just simple CFD simulations. We have a bio member of the team that was able to basically simulate how the alveoli would respond to various pressure conditions generated by the mechanical ventilator.
Very cool. That's just really fascinating. So, from a modeling standpoint, cleaning up STLs of scan data, I know, is really challenging. But what other aspects were challenging for you that when you built these simulations?
There are a number of things that were challenging. I think the one that really the thing that comes to mind the most is just the effort itself. I mentioned that it transitioned from a manufacturing project to more of a research project. It's one of those projects where where the scope and the needs aren't necessarily defined early on. So there were a lot of quick changes and pivots that were needed on our end. And it wasn't just on the modeling and CFD front. It was in all aspects. A lot of changes to help, reach deliverables that might help potential patients.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful example. The how was meshing? Did you you do anything special to mesh it, or did you just kind of blow a hex dominant core, or did you do a tet mesh? What was your preferred method?
Obviously, it would be ideal if we could use a hex mesh, and that has been done in the literature. But in general, the literature behind CFD modeling of lungs, using a tet mesh is perfectly acceptable.
Okay.
So, and that was, one of the challenges was, you have a finite amount of resources, time being probably the most critical one. So, a tet mesh was good enough, and that really allowed us to, focus our resources in other areas that were, they were needed more in.
Cool. Was there something that surprised you, both from a modeling standpoint or from the results you were getting, that were kind of like, I didn't expect that?
I didn't expect to be able to procure the. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. I wasn't able to. I was able to procure the geometry much faster than I was expecting. I think I was able to refine the STL, clean it up, have it imported into the mesher within probably a month. And I was expecting that would take a predominant amount of the time that we had. And then I expected the setup, the actual CFD portion of the setup to take much longer than it did. So there were some aspects that time-wise that I expected to be much more demanding than they were. So in some ways, it was a good surprise. Yeah, it was a good surprise, not a negative one. So.
That's always the best kind. I hear you on that. Did you use parallel a lot of HPC on this? Did you run it on a larger cluster, or were you able to run it on a relatively small one?
We predominantly ran the cases that we did on just local workstations. Okay. Just with the nature of the project, by the time we had things scaled up and ready to run on HPC, the funding that we had to do the research ran out. And then additionally, a lot of the simulations that we did, some of the ideas that we had were great for potential long-term applications, but some of them would require FDA approval, which we knew we wouldn't be able to get in the time frame that we had to work with. So most of the simulations we did, they were predominantly targeted towards helping guide some of the experiments.
Good.
With where do you want to place your sensors? What kind of flow behavior are you expecting? Things of that nature. So a lot of the immediate simulations that we did were focused more towards assisting the overall lead of the effort and the lead of the experimental team.
Great. No, that's fantastic. So I guess my big question is, if you could do this again, let's I don't want to say we have another pandemic and you need to model this, but let's say there's follow-on work that gets funded, and you have to start over again. What would you do differently if you had a chance to redo this project?
So we are currently pursuing additional funding to extend the work. I don't think that there's anything that we would do differently. I think given the circumstances, I think we operated, pretty efficiently and we got quite a bit done. I think the biggest thing that, and I know my team would echo this, that, a long, sustained, consistent effort I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of the initial work, it was very chaotic. We would have a month where we got a ton done, and then we would have to pivot and maybe slow our roll on a certain aspect of the project. So a lot of our timing, I think, was a little bit off on some of the work that we did. So having a long, steady approach, I think, is probably the biggest thing that comes to mind.
Great. That's isn't that true of a lot of projects? That's a very good point. That's great. After this experience, any advice to users out there that you want to pass along to any of our listeners?
I guess just understanding that, when it comes to simulation and most engineering, everything is a balance. You're constantly balancing, resources, scope, needs, demands, and then even within that, you're balancing, messaging to people on the business side and then people on the technical side. So understanding the balance and doing your best to consistently navigate that.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. So true. We want to just focus on the nodes and elements, right, and the mesh, but there's so much more. There's so much more out there. Which turbulence model do I use? That's what we want to be the big debate, but there's so much more to take into account. Well, very informative and really, really cool. And I also want to point out to our listeners that it's just one example of how LANL responded to the pandemic, and even research done. And I'll try and find a link to share some research done on the genetic mapping side of things long before the pandemic hit that was used to get the vaccine done so quickly with sequencing. I mean, there's so many different things that LANL did. It's fantastic. Yeah,
this was an interesting project, but it was only a small fraction of the overall response on LANL's front.
Yeah, so if people are interested in how your taxpayer dollars being spent and this sort of thing, just doing a search on Los Alamos National Labs and COVID-19, there's so many useful both technical and news articles about the things that were done, and really I want to, on behalf of everybody, I want to thank you and the rest of the team there for stepping up and stepping out of your comfort zone, and I'm sure you were doing all this while, like everybody else, you were trying to figure out how to work from home. So we really appreciate it. Yeah. Well, thanks. I love this. What a great application, and I hope in the future you get to do more cool stuff. And have you guys been able to publish your results? That was actually one other thing I wanted to ask.
We're in the process of publishing a few things.
Okay.
There's a few other things that we may not be able to publish immediately, but we do have plans to publish what we currently have at some point, if if not in the near future, down the road.
Good.
We'll have something out there.
Well, definitely people should look for that and search the internet, because I know that I'm sure that what you did will be applicable to anybody really modeling, dealing with lungs, whether it's getting medication down there or dealing with clearing out mucus or so many other applications. I'm sure you guys learned a lot. So look forward to seeing that published. Yeah. Okay. Well, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for calling in. Enjoy the cooler weather there in New Mexico as we begin to heat up here in Arizona. And and I speak for everybody at PADT. We can't wait to get out and visit you guys in New Mexico soon, hopefully.
Can't wait either.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a good rest of the week.
Thanks so much for having me.
Appreciate it. What a great experience. You could tell I want to talk about more stuff. And that's just one of the many projects undertaken by the labs where their skill, experience, and equipment, and often their immense compute power, were brought to bear to solve difficult problems. So keep your eye on what they're up to, and hopefully we'll share more in the future from that lab as well as other labs that we interface with. PADT does work with Sandia, Idaho National Labs, and a couple of smaller ones around the country. Speaking of compute power, for this episode's commercial, I want to talk about Ansys Cloud and Ansys Elastic Licensing. A one-two punch that easily delivers the software and horsepower you need when you need it. Now you can use Elastic Licensing to run on your own hardware, on third-party cloud, or on Ansys Cloud. Flexibility is the watchword for these products. What you need, when you need it, where you need it. Elastic Licensing is a pay-as-you-go way to access most Ansys products, high-performance computing, and even hardware. It can be used with your existing licenses or on its own. You can manage your Elastic assets using the new Ansys licensing portal. It even lets you manage your Elastic licensing usage by project and/or users. They have really made this easy and flexible. And if you don't have the hardware, you can use the licenses to access just the right amount of power to get your work done on time. If you have not explored your Elastic licensing options and Ansys Cloud, now is the time to reach out and learn more. You, like many of our customers, will most likely end up saying, that is exactly what I needed. All right, let's take a look at Ansys news. Ansys stock finished the week, which ended June 11th. Friday was June 11th, at $336.42 a share. That's down 7.53% for the year. So looking at related stocks, Autodesk is pretty much in the same situation. They're down 9%, whereas Altair and PTC are up 12.6% and 14%. Each of them. For comparison, the S&P 500 is up about 12.86. So it seems like Ansys and Autodesk are down for the year slightly, and Altair and PTC are kind of tracking the S&P 500. So it's not a year for these CAE stocks to outperform the market, it seems like. As I stated before, I don't understand the stock market. Why on earth Ansys is down is a mystery to me. So I searched and found an article on Yahoo Finance from an outfit called Zacks Equity Research. Don't know why they're good, but they got themselves published in Yahoo. Why is Ansys down 1% since the last earnings report is the headline for their article. And they repeat the earnings report. Most of the article is just the numbers that we went over a couple podcasts ago. And that's all good and dandy. And then they give these grades. They give Ansys a B for growth, C for momentum, and a D for value, which gives them a GPA on their scale of a solid C. I don't know what that means. And they do say that their estimates are trending down. So it didn't really help me understand what the fundamentals are. I'm kind of coming to the conclusion that it's just that there are other stocks that investors feel will go up faster, and that's why they're putting their money in there. Your guess is as good as mine. Along those same lines, Ansys was added to another list, this time the Fortune Future 50. So Fortune magazine has this group of companies they list every year called the Future 50, and it's the 50 public companies with the strongest long-term growth potential. And that's pretty much the only news that they had to share since the last time we had our podcast, when they announced the acquisition of another company. But otherwise, nothing new news there. Wise, and the same is true for PADT. We don't have anything new to report in the news world. So let's move on to blogs. If you pop over to blog.ansys.com, you'll find some good posts as usual. My two favorite are reverse engineering with a phone and space claim. So it's about scanning with a phone an object. It's someone's boat, actually. They wanted to put an extension on the end of the boat, so they took out their iPhone 11, which has LiDAR built in, and they didn't say which app they used, but there's quite a few out there, and they scanned the back, read that into SpaceClaim, cleaned it up, and built a model in SpaceClaim, and then ran it in Discovery. So it's a great example of a very practical, easy solution. And what's cool about it, beyond normal use of SpaceClaim and Discovery, is they used the phone to do the scanning. It was fairly accurate. The second one is called Get High Fidelity Optical Edge Case Analysis with LiDAR Simulation. And it's a deep look at how Ansys simulation can be used to understand that same LiDAR technology, but in this case cars, to look at what they call these edge cases, these optical, not so common cases that are not in the middle of the box when you're looking at the way LiDAR works. I do take a recommendation that you take a look at that. It's a pretty cool article, and again, getting our head around, those of us who aren't in that world, getting our head around how these tools like Speos work and what the value proposition is for them. Over on the PADT blog side, it's kind of an Ansys adjacent thing. Miles Adkins keeps on adding every week an article about Flownex, and he added two very recently. The first one is custom result layers, and the second one is creating custom fluids. Over on the Ansys side, Josh Stout added a video where he shows how to use Ansys IcePack in Electronic Desktop to set up and solve a complex enclosure model with an accurate representation of the PCB. So it's a pretty complicated board. It's got some heat exchangers on it, and it's pretty typical enclosure simulation. So if you're looking to do that kind of thing, check out that video. He kind of steps through all the steps to build and run the model. It's aptly titled Setting Up and Solving a PCB and Enclosure for Thermal Simulation in Ansys IcePack Electronic Desktop. And for fun, our latest chapter in our novel, A PADT Engineer in King Atabal's Court, was released. This is the 5th installment, and it's entitled City on the Nile. And it involves some electrochemical engineering, manufacturing, and pirates. It may not be very well written at all, and it has a plot hole that Hannibal could ride an elephant through, or multiple plot holes that Hannibal could ride an elephant through, but it's been fun so far. If you haven't checked it out, please do. Like I said, it's their 5th chapter, and it details the story of a young, fictitious member of PADT staff who gets transported back in time to ancient Phoenicia. Get it? Phoenix. Phoenicia. Yeah, we're very clever. Do check it out at www.padtinc.com/blog, where you can find the articles I mentioned as well. I also want to put a plug in for 2 webinar recordings from our aerospace mini conference this week. The first, Simulating the Future of Aerospace, has 2 presentations worth watching if you're in aerospace or interested in aerospace. The first is from former PADT application engineer, a frequent guest on this podcast when he worked here, and now Ansys aerospace account manager, Manoj Mahendran. And he gives us a brilliant overview of all the new and exciting ways that Ansys simulates even more of the aerospace world. So if you're using one Ansys product in aerospace, I recommend you check it out to learn about all the other ones. Then Nate McBee joins us to share a great overview of AGI. And we covered the history and the merger of AGI with Ansys in a previous podcast. And he goes into some very specific examples of how it's used in aerospace for digital mission simulation, which is what they do. Then the second recording that I really recommend people check out is Manoj then joins Jerry Feldmiller, who's from Stratasys, for a panel where we discuss the future of both simulation and 3D printing in aerospace. And it's a great discussion with 2 very intelligent guys about what's really popular with their aerospace customers right now and what they see coming down the pipe. So that was a fun discussion, and I recommend you can check out both of those at brighttalk.com. Search for PADT, and you can get a list of them and all of our other presentations from the past. Let's take a look at events. Speaking of Bright Talk, actually, our next webinar is Materials, Composites, and Scripting Updates in Ansys Mechanical 2021 R1. So there's something there for everybody. Everybody needs materials and scripting probably, and composites are becoming more and more popular. So our very own Doug Otis will bring everyone up to date on what is added in that latest release. And taking a look at the padtinc.com/events page, which is where we list all of our events and what is going on in our world. The next one coming up is an event that I'm attending. It's on the 15th of June, and it's called Virtual Engineering Days. It's a design and manufacturing show, and it was going to be held live, but they're doing it virtual this year. And I'll be giving a presentation on efficient material selection and management and additive manufacturing. And basically I'm going to talk about how we use Ansys Granta and some good rules to pick the right materials for all the different 3D printing things we do here. So if you're interested in additive manufacturing, check that out. I'm going to talk quite a bit about simulation and how it's used in our process as well to make sure we pick the right material before we actually build stuff. And that's going to be on the 15th. The specific talk is at 10:45 Arizona time. And then the webinar that I spoke about already that Doug's giving on materials, composite, and scripting in Ansys 2021 R1. And then on the 24th, we will have our first live event with the Arizona Technology Council, the 2021 MedTech Conference. We're not presenting at this one, but I will be attending. It's at venue 8600 in Scottsdale. So if you're a listener here from the Arizona area and are interested in MedTech, this is going to be an event. It looks like a lot of people are coming to. Everybody wants to get together again. And then in July, we'll be doing the Aerospace, Aviation, Defense, and Manufacturing Conference. I'll be announcing a panel that I'll be heading up for that. That's from 1 to 5 at the same location, venue 8600 in Scottsdale on the 15th of July. So we look forward to that one. And again, seeing all of our aerospace and manufacturing friends. And I'll go ahead and bring up the remaining big events for us because it's getting crowded right now. And August will be at what is now called D&M West. It used to be called the Pacific Design Show or MD&M West. It's called D&M West now. And I'll be speaking at that event and hosting a panel. And PADT will have a booth. So those of you listening from Southern California, do reach out to your Ansys salesperson, and we can get you a ticket to at least come by and see the booths and come say hi to us. Let's see, I got that panel there. The CEO retreat is going to be on the 17th through the 19th for the Arizona Technology Council in Prescott this year. And then we will be attending the 36th Space Symposium. This is the big event in space. It's not in space, but about space, the space industry in Colorado Springs every year. We, of course, missed it last year, and we weren't honestly going to go this year, but with the vaccine doing so well, what we're seeing is tons of people are signing up. It's going to be a very crowded event, a lot of speakers, a lot of cool stuff going on. PADT will be hosting an Arizona aerospace booth there with 3 other customers, 2 of which are Ansys users that we work with. And we hope to see anybody that's going to be going to the Space Symposium there, so do stop by. And that is what I have for events. That's a lot. Again, that's going to be in August. And I'm pretty much done. So I want to thank everybody for listening, as always. It's fantastic to have such a great audience and such great feedback from all of you. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast where you get your podcasts, and also to our newsletter at www.padtinc.com/opt-in, and spread the word, and don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you for joining us for the All Things Ansys podcast, episode 90. As a reminder, this podcast is not affiliated in any way with Ansys Inc., and the opinions expressed are those of the people on the show only and not of their current or former employers. For more information, visit www.padtinc.com/blog, and please share your thoughts and questions through an email to podcast@padtinc.com. See you next time.